Judges. Chapter 13. The Israelites continued to do what was evil in the Lord's sight, so the Lord handed them over to the Philistines to rule them for 40 years. At that time there was a man named Manoah. He was from the tribe of Dan and lived in the town of Zorah. His wife couldn't conceive and had no children. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and told her, "It's true that you couldn't conceive and have no children, but now you're going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. So then please be careful not to drink any wine or other alcoholic drink, and don't eat anything unclean. You're going to become pregnant and have a son whose head a razor must never touch, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from birth. He will start the process of saving Israel from the Philistines." The woman went and told her husband, "A man of God came to me. He looked like the angel of God, really frightening. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he did not tell me his name. But he told me, 'You're going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. You must not drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, and don't eat anything unclean. For the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from birth until the day of his death.' Then Manoah prayed to the Lord, 'Please, Lord, let the man of God you sent us return to us to explain what we're supposed to do with the boy who is to be born.' God responded to Manoah's request, and the angel of God returned to the woman while she was sitting out in the field. However, her husband Manoah was not with her. So she ran quickly to tell her husband, 'Look, the man who appeared to me the other day has come back.' Manoah got up and went back with his wife and asked, 'Are you the man who spoke to my wife before?' 'Yes, I am,' he replied. So Manoah said, 'May your promise come true. What shall be decided for the boy, and what is to be his vocation? Make sure your wife is careful to follow everything I told her,' the angel of the Lord replied. 'She must not eat anything that comes from the vine or drink wine or any other alcoholic drink. She must not eat anything unclean. Your wife must follow everything I instructed her to do.' Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'Please let us keep you here while we prepare a meal of a young goat for you.' The angel of the Lord replied, 'I'll stay, but I won't eat your food. However, if you prepare a burnt offering, you can present it to the Lord.' Manoah didn't know he was the angel of the Lord. Manoah asked the angel of the Lord, 'What is your name, so when your promise comes true we may honor you?' 'Why do you ask this?' the angel of the Lord responded. 'My name is beyond comprehension.' Manoah took a young goat and a grain offering and presented them on a rock to the Lord. As Manoah and his wife watched, the Lord did something amazing. As the flame from the altar blazed up into the sky, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Manoah and his wife saw what happened and fell with their faces to the ground. The angel of the Lord did not appear to Manoah or his wife again, and Manoah realized that he was the angel of the Lord. 'We're definitely going to die,' he told his wife, 'for we have seen God.' But his wife replied, 'If the Lord had wanted to kill us, he wouldn't have accepted our burnt offering and grain offering. He wouldn't have shown us all these things, and he wouldn't have come now and announced this to us.' She gave birth to a son and named him Samson. The boy grew up, and the Lord blessed him. The Spirit of the Lord began to prompt him at Mahanadan, a place between Zorah and Eshtaol. Judges. Chapter 14. One day Samson went to Timnah, where a young Philistine woman attracted his attention. He went back home and told his father and mother, "A Philistine woman in Timnah caught my attention. Now get her for me because I want to marry her." But his father and mother replied, "Can't you find a young woman from our tribe or from our own people? Do you have to go to the heathen Philistines to get a wife?" But Samson told his father, "Just get her for me, because she's the one I find her attractive." His father and mother didn't realize that this was in the Lord's plans, who was looking for an opportunity to deal with the Philistines, because at that time the Philistines ruled over Israel. Samson went to Timnah with his father and mother. When they passed the Timnah vineyards, all of a sudden a young lion came roaring out to attack him. The Spirit of the Lord swept over him, and he ripped the lion apart with his bare hands as easily as ripping apart a young goat. But he didn't tell his father or mother what he'd done. Then he went on his way. When Samson talked with the woman and decided she was right for him, Later on, when Samson returned to marry her, he turned off the road to look for the lion's carcass. Inside the body was a swarm of bees and their honey. He scraped out some of honey into his hands and ate it as he walked. When he got back to his father and mother, he gave some to them and they ate it. But he didn't tell them he'd taken the honey from a lion's carcass. While his father went to visit the woman, Samson held a drinking party there, because this was the custom among high-class young men. When the Philistine people saw him, they arranged for 30 men to accompany him. "Let me pose a riddle to you," Samson said to them. "If you can find its meaning and explain it to me during the 7 days of the party, I'll give you 30 lions' cloaks and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't explain it to me, you'll give me 30 lions' cloaks and 30 sets of clothes." "Fine," they replied. "Let's hear your riddle." "Food came out of the eater, and sweetness came out of the strong," he said. 3 days later, they still hadn't worked it out. On the 4th day, they came to Samson's wife and told her, "Use your charms to get your husband to explain the riddle and then tell us, or we'll burn you and all your family to death. Did you bring us here just to rob us?" So Samson's wife went crying to him, saying, "You really do hate me, don't you? You don't love me at all. You have posed a riddle to my people, but haven't even explained it to me." "So," he replied, "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother. Why should I explain it to you?" She cried in front of him for the whole time of the party, and eventually on the 7th day he explained it to her because she nagged him so much. Then she explained the meaning of the riddle to the Philistine young men. Before the sun set on the 7th day, the men of the town came to Samson and said, "What's sweeter than honey? What's stronger than a lion? If you hadn't used my cow to plow with, you wouldn't have found out the meaning of my riddle," Samson replied. The Spirit of the Lord swept over him, and he went to Ashkelon, killed 30 of their men, took their clothing, and gave it to those who had explained the riddle. Furiously angry, Samson went back to his father's house. Samson's wife was given to his best man who had accompanied him at the wedding. Judges. Chapter 15. Sometime later, when the wheat was being harvested, Samson went to pay his wife a visit, taking with him a young goat as a present. "I want to go to my wife in her bedroom," he said when he arrived, but her father would not let him go in. "I thought you must totally hate her, so I gave her to your best man," he told Samson. "But her younger sister is even more attractive. Why don't you marry her instead?" "This time I can't be blamed for the trouble I'm going to cause the Philistines," Samson declared. He went and caught 300 foxes and tied their tails together, 2 by 2. He attached a torch to each of the tied tails and set them on fire. Then he let them loose in the grain fields of the Philistines, setting fire to all the grain, harvested and unharvested, as well as the vineyards and olive groves. "Who did this?" the Philistines asked. "It was Samson, the son-in-law of the man from Timnah," they were told. That man gave Samson's wife to Samson's best man. So the Philistines went and burned her and her father to death. Samson told them, "If this is the way you're going to act, then I won't stop until I take my revenge on you." He attacked them violently, killing them, and then left to go and live in a cave at the rock of Etam. So the Philistine army came and camped in Judah, drawn up for battle near Lehi. The people of Judah asked, "Why have you invaded us?" "We've come to capture Samson, to do to him what he's done to us," they replied. 3,000 men of Judah went to the cave at the rock of Etam and asked Samson, "Don't you understand that the Philistines rule over us? What do you think you're doing to us?" "I only did what they did to me," he replied. "Well, we've come to take you prisoner and hand you over to the Philistines," they told him. "Just swear to me that you're not going to kill me yourselves," Samson answered. "No, we won't," they assured him. "We'll only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines. We certainly aren't going to kill you." They tied him using 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. When Samson got close to Lehi, the Philistines ran towards him, shouting at him. But the Spirit of the Lord swept over him, and the ropes tying his arms together became as weak as burnt flax, and his hands broke free. He grabbed the fresh jawbone of a donkey, using it to kill 1,000 Philistines. Then Samson declared, "With a donkey's jawbone I have piled the dead into heaps. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." After Samson had finished his speech, he threw away the jawbone, and he named the place Hill of the Jawbone. He was now extremely thirsty, and Samson called out to the Lord, saying, "You have achieved this amazing victory through your servant, but now do I have to die of thirst and be captured by the heathen?" So God split open a rock seam in Lehi, and water came out of it. Samson drank and his strength returned. He felt much better. That's why he named it the Spring of the Collar, and it's still there in Lehi to this very day. Samson led Israel as judge for 20 years during the time of the Philistines. Judges. Chapter 16. Samson went to Gaza. There he saw a prostitute, and he went to have sex with her that night. The men of Gaza found out Samson was there, so they gathered to spend the night lying in wait for him at the town gates. They kept quiet all night, whispering to one another, "We'll kill him when it gets light." But Samson only stayed until halfway through the night. He grabbed hold of the town gates along with their 2 posts and ripped them up, along with the lock bar. Putting them on his shoulders, he carried them to the hill opposite Hebron. Later he fell in love with a woman named Delilah living in the Sorek Valley. The Philistine leaders approached her, saying, "See if you can seduce him and get him to show you the secret of his incredible strength, and find out how we can overpower him and tie him up so he can't do anything. We'll all give you 1,100 shekels of silver each." Delilah went and pleaded with Samson, "Please tell me where your incredible strength comes from, and what can be used to tie you up so you can't do anything. If I'm tied up with 7 supple bowstrings that haven't dried out, I'll become just as weak," Samson told her. The Philistine leaders brought her 7 supple bowstrings that hadn't dried out, and she tied him up with them. Having arranged for men to hide in her bedroom ready to attack him, she shouted out, "Samson, the Philistines are here to get you." But he snapped the bowstrings like a thread snaps when a flame touches it. So nobody found out where his strength came from. Later Delilah said to Samson, "You've made me look stupid, telling me these lies. So now please tell me what can be used to tie you up. If I'm tied up tight with new ropes that haven't been used before, I'll become just as weak as anyone else," he told her. So Delilah got some new ropes and tied him up with them. She shouted out, "Samson, the Philistines are here to get you." As before, men were hiding in her bedroom. But again Samson snapped the ropes from his arms as if they were thin threads. Delilah said to Samson, "You keep on making me look stupid, telling me these lies. Just tell me what can be used to tie you up. If you were to weave the 7 braids of my hair into the web on the loom and tighten it with the pin, I'll become as weak as anyone else," he told her. So while he was asleep, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, weaving them into the web, and tightening the pin. She shouted out, "Samson, the Philistines are here to get you." But Samson woke up and ripped out both the pin and the web from the loom. Then Delilah complained to Samson, "How can you tell me, 'I love you,' when you don't let me into your confidence? 3 times you've made me look stupid, not telling me where your incredible strength comes from." She nagged and complained all the time, pestering him until he wanted to die. Eventually Samson confided in her, sharing everything. "My hair has never been cut, because I've been dedicated as a Nazirite to God from my birth. If I'm shaved, my strength will leave me, and I'll become as weak as anyone else." Delilah realized that he had truly confided in her and shared everything. She sent a message to the Philistine leaders telling them, "Come back once more, because this time he's confided in me and told me everything." So the Philistine leaders returned, bringing with them the money to give to her. Delilah soothed him sleep on her lap, and then called in someone to shave off the 7 braids of hair. She started to torment him, but he couldn't do anything for his strength left him. She shouted out, "Samson, the Philistines are here to get you." Samson woke up and thought to himself, "I'll do like before and shake myself free." But he didn't know that the Lord had left him. The Philistines grabbed him and gouged out his eyes. Then they took him to Gaza, where they imprisoned him in bronze chains. He was made to work grinding grain at the mill in the prison. But his hair began to grow back after it had been shaved off. The Philistine leaders gathered for a great religious festival to sacrifice to their god Dagon and to celebrate, saying, "Our God has handed Samson, our enemy, over to us." When the people saw him, they praised their God and said, "Our God has handed our enemy over to us, the one who devastated our land and killed so many of us." As they began to get drunk, they shouted, "Summon Samson so he can entertain us." So they summoned Samson from the prison to entertain them and made him stand between the two main pillars of the building. Samson said to the servant boy who was leading him by the hand, "Leave me by the pillars on which the temple rests so I can feel them and lean against them." The temple was full of people. All the Philistine rulers were there, and on the roof were the ordinary people watching what Samson was doing. Samson called out to the Lord, "Lord God, please remember me and give me strength. Please God, do this just once more, so that with one act I may pay the Philistines back in revenge for the loss of my 2 eyes." Samson reached for the 2 little pillars that supported the temple, with his right hand leaning on one pillar and his left hand on the other. Samson shouted, "Let me die with the Philistines," and he pushed with all his strength. The temple collapsed on the rulers and all the people in it. So those killed at his death were more than he killed in his life. Then his brothers and his whole family came and took him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah his father. He led Israel as judge for 20 years.